Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Thursday Night Teachings. And we're going to start tonight with setting the motivation for being here together. We have been circling in cyclic existence since beginningless time, which I think for most of our minds is pretty hard to grok. And during those beginningless cycles of samsara, we have been here, there, and everywhere. We have been gods and demigods. We've been animals. We've been humans, hungry ghosts, hell beings. We've resided in the form and formless realms in deep states of samadhi. And yet, here we are, still cycling in samsara, under the control of afflictions and karma, sabotaged by our self-centered thought, and continually struggling with the amnesia that comes from the ignorance that keeps us from seeing reality as it really is. And we haven't created the causes and conditions when we have met the Buddha's teachings to be able to have the determination, the mind, the motivation to enter the path and keep going. But here we are, in this extraordinary, precious human life, with qualified Mahayana teachers, with Dharma friends, all the freedoms and fortunes that come with precious human life. And so while we have our wits about us, while we have these remarkable, rare causes and conditions, let's set our motivation firmly on the path to not fall into complacency, not fall into discouragement as best as we can, and to know that we are doing the best we can, taking each moment, taking the teachings into our practice, taking the teachings into our lives. So now that we have met the Buddha's teachings once again, in extraordinary circumstances, may we set our determination to keep the momentum going now and in all future lives, not to be waylaid by the self-centered thought, to try and understand how reality exists, to open our hearts to developing bodhicitta so it may never fail, may never succumb to the self-centered thought, so that we may be all awakened for the benefit of all beings who we depend on for our awakening and who deeply depend on us to awaken. And so tonight, as we go over the last of the quiz, let's keep that in our minds and hearts, and why we're here, how precious this opportunity is, and to do our best to hold it in our hearts, that deep motivation to become awakened for the benefit of all. Let's set that determination with joy in our hearts and with a curiosity. Well, we are in the home stretch here, folks. The last 4 of Venerable 16 questions on the grounds and paths. And I personally have found, I think we've been doing these quizzes since the 4 establishments of mindfulness, I think we started. And I don't know whether she brought up the idea or we made a request, but we figured out that if we were going to have any understanding of these profound, vast teachings that she's been giving us in the past few years, that we needed to have some sort of structure that would give us an opportunity to revisit the teachings. And so the quizzes I have found personally very beneficial, because I forget almost everything I hear the first time, so I've got to revisit things. Clean up my notes, which I'm horrified to see the chaos that's in them, and the half-truths that are in them too. So it's been really a lot of fun and challenging too to do the quizzes. These are very, very difficult and challenging teachings. But let's see where we can go and how we can support each other tonight on the last 4. And they are interactive, some a little bit more straightforward, and some definitely I'm going to need your participation. So number 13. Put it in here. There we go. Okay, so we are at number 13. What are the 37 harmonies or wings with awakening? And we took the 8 Mahayana precepts this morning, and there's a line in the precepts that says the 37 aids to enlightenment. So I think we're talking about the same ones here. So I just wanted to start off with sharing a few of the beautiful quotes, because the 37 harmonies come into the Bodhisattva practice and the path on the 4th ground, which is the ground of the radiant. And so I want to just start this question off on the beautiful verses by Nagarjuna and also Maitreya. The 4th is called the radiant, because the light of true wisdom arises, in which the Bodhisattva cultivates supremely all the harmonies with enlightenment. Through the maturation of these qualities, the Bodhisattva becomes a kind of the gods in the land without combat. He or she is skilled in quelling the arising of the view that the transitory collection is a real self. And Maitreya says, because the possessing factor is harmonious with enlightenment, burning forth like light, this ground burns away the two whereby it is called the radiant. And then finally Nagarjuna's praise of the element of qualities, this ground, due to being illuminated by the light of constant virtue, and encircled by the light of the exalted wisdom that has abandoned commotion, is asserted as the radiant. So the 37 harmonies come onto the Bodhisattva path on the 4th ground. And a few things about this 4th ground. It's called radiant because the light of true wisdom arises, in which the Bodhisattva cultivates supremely all the harmonies. The Bodhisattva achieves the 12 sets of qualities increased 1 trillion times. In subsequent attainment, he or she amasses the collection of merit for the sake of abandoning the big of the middling afflictive obscurations on the path of meditation. When this Bodhisattva sees the signs of being able to abandon them, and the Venerable says they actually have a sense that they're getting close. They enter into meditative equipoise on emptiness, where they enter the uninterrupted path, where they are abandoning the big of the middling of the afflictive obscurations, and move into the liberated path, in which one's meditative consciousness becomes an actual antidote to those obstructions, and then simultaneously enter the 5th ground. It is also during this ground where the Bodhisattva is perfecting the far-reaching practice of joyous effort, abandoning the 3 types of laziness, whether asleep or dreaming. They are the principal practices a Bodhisattva does in the qualities they develop. And this is whether they are on the disciple's path, the hero, the solitary realizer, or bodhisattvas. So these practices are the fundamental and the universal vehicle practices. So let's go through them. So let's start with the first 4. What do we got? We'll count them up. Which are? Okay, that's easy enough. We have anybody want to add anything? Because, you know, we can go through this list very, very quickly, but if anybody wants to add something, please feel free. One of the things that they did say is that the 4 establishments of mindfulness are the basis on which all these qualities are built upon. And so they are the first 4, and then everything builds on top. So there's 4. Mm-hmm.
So what does that actually mean to completed on the 4th practice? Does it mean they're realized here, or anybody know what that means?
Well, this is where I think we've had some similar questions, and on this one, Venerable said to remind us that all the practices eliminate different obscurations, and they don't all line up because we are eliminating them and practicing them from the first ground up. And she said not to think of them very sort of linearly. So I would say, I don't know the answer to your question. So maybe it's a realization. Does anybody have any thoughts? Okay, so the 4 establishments of mindfulness, Venerable Chini wants to know, they've been practicing them from the get-go, and why now do they become on the forefront of this 4th ground? And we're thinking that, you know, they're just deepening the understanding, the realization of them. Venerable, do you think?
Well, I have that quote that said that according to the treasury of knowledge, the correlation with 37 harmonies of the 5 paths, the 4 establishments of mindfulness is correlated with the path of accumulation. Yeah, that sounds good.
So when they start really practicing them.
Yeah.
So by now, they've got them in their minds, their mental continuum on some deeper, subtle level, because a lot of these was coarse and subtle forms of all of these practices, and I'm sure at this point they're getting to be quite subtle.
When you say the accumulation, because I have accumulated a lot of merit, that means now we are perfect.
Well, I think in the path of accumulation, one practice would be the 4
Establishments of mindfulness.
quite focused. I think that's how I
Mm-hmm.
think.
So on the path of accumulation, Venerable Jigme is saying that the Bodhisattva spends a lot of their time probably in subsequent attainment, or the one that is not in exalted wisdom, or in subsequent attainment, but neither. So as before they're getting into the uninterrupted path, this is one of the main practices that they are taking to the cushion.
Actually, it wouldn't be mental.
Yeah, the exalted wisdom, that is neither.
But neither is meditation on emptiness. What is the 6th meditation?
The method type of realizer, perhaps, when they're on the cushion thinking about it then. But there's a method type of realizer too, and wisdom type. Yeah, the method type of realizer when you're in subsequent attainment is also meditating on other things besides emptiness. Yeah. Okay. Illusion-like nature is in the method type of realizer when they're off the cushion. This is where we need to just get the questions clear. Okay, so what are we saying about the... in the service? Mm-hmm. Okay, so the 4 establishments of mindfulness practiced during the wisdom type realizer and subsequent attainment? Or they just... Okay, well that's why I'm asking to see if we have more information. Okay. 4th, next ones. which are
Generating virtuous qualities, increasing virtuous qualities that we have, not generating non-virtuous qualities that we don't have, abandoning non-virtuous qualities that we do have.
when I came to these, I said, you know, we're kind of practicing this kind of right now. Learning what to abandon and what to cultivate. So there are different types of effort. Okay, so that's 8. Next. What do we have next?
Well, there's the 6 states of thought, also known as the 4 lists of manifestation. These are states of concentration, the bodies and complete concentration. First one's aspiration, the second one's effort, the third one's intention, and the fourth one is analysis.
Anybody have anything to add to that?
Yeah, trying to translate these over to something else. Concentration is aspiration, effort, and mind, and investigation.
Mind instead of intention, and investigation instead of analysis.
I didn't get great insight from that fact when I thought that. I like knowing the
Translations. But you can see how these 4 mental states would help, states of concentration, when done at this point on the Bodhisattva ground. Because the states of concentration are incredibly important, especially when emanating bodies to benefit others. Okay, the next 5 faculties of different qualities during meditation. When these qualities become very strong, they can eliminate their negative counterparts. So what do we have here?
faith, effort, mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom.
Okay, so faith eliminates
Non-faith.
faith. Effort eliminates laziness. Mindfulness, which eliminates not being able to keep one's mind on an object, which I would think would be emptiness. And concentration eliminates distraction, and wisdom eliminates wrong view and ignorance. And then Venerable says when these faculties become developed, they become known as the 5 powers, which is another set. So these are the 5 powers that we have spoken of before. They're different powers. Okay. And I don't know what those 5 powers are. She did not list them when she taught them.
I think it's the same. That when I listen to 5 faculties, I go to the power of faith.
Okay.
That was the way I understood it.
Okay, because she didn't have an explanation when I re-listened to the teaching. Okay, then we go into the 7 enlightenment factors: correct mindfulness, discernment of phenomena, effort, rapture, pliancy, concentration, and equanimity. And these factors help a bodhisattva refine the union of serenity and insight. And then lastly, the Noble Eightfold Path. Correct view, intention, speech, action, livelihood, mindfulness, concentration, and effort. Well, that's how she put them when Okay, so it's because it's part of the, it's the ethics, these can be subsumed into the 3 higher trainings. Okay. So when I was listening to Venerable's teaching on this, said that this ground is called the radiant because it helps cultivate both the subtle and coarse forms of the 37 harmonies. The subtle form is focused on eliminating the view of inherent existence of person and phenomena, and the coarse form of the 37 is focused on eliminating the view of the self-sufficient, substantially existent person. So there must be different stages of the Bodhisattva's meditation on this, where these things just get more and more refined and focused on eliminating these different wrong views. But there was no more specifics about what she said Anything else folks want to add on those 37 harmonies? Pretty straightforward. The 4 bases. I have no idea what level of effort, what level mindfulness gets repeated sometimes in the different grounds. These are the questions that we can ask Venerable when she returns. Yeah, because there's an effort in the 5 faculties, there's an effort in the 4 bases of spiritual powers too, so. Yep. So let's put that down. What's the difference? Okay, so that was the first. That was question number 13. Number 14. This one I don't have. I'll need some help on this one. What are the pure and impure grounds, and why are they so called? I have 2 sentences here. I looked and did not find. So, the second to the lower 8th ground are called the impure grounds because a bodhisattva's mental continuum is still not free from the innate afflictions that give rise to the grasping at true existence. From the upper ground, 8th ground, to the 10th, the bodhisattva is free of these innate afflictions and is now working on the obstructions to omniscience which eliminate the subtle appearance of true existence once and for all. That's that came off of Jeffrey Hopkins's book. I didn't track it in the teaching. Does anybody else have something different? Okay.
So, impure is like
And the grasping. So even
one of the few
straightforward questions that we've had that didn't require a lot of searching and analysis. Yeah. Okay. Now we come to number 15, which I think is probably, this was the one that I enjoyed doing on a personal side, and it is an interactive question. So I think Venerable wants us to check in to find out, what did this all really do for us this past, I think it's been over a year, of listening to the teachings on the grounds and paths. And so number 15 is, how has studying the paths and grounds related to your Dharma practice, and what benefits have you received from studying these? So this is something that maybe we can, I would actually like to pass the microphone around so people could really personally just give their own experience, because I think this is really important for people who are watching, and I think for each of us, so that I don't have to repeat everybody's answers and people can hear. So Venerable Jigme will go first.
Pardon? Oh. When I first started hearing these teachings, I remember the first thing I did was get quite discouraged. It really, kind of hit me that, gosh, this takes so long. But as Venerable got into it and started describing the qualities that you attain on the path, then it switched to really feeling inspired. So it's kind of like through this process I got my view clearer about just how long this takes. More realistically, I think I hold it now. And the other thing that I learned that really is informing my practice, trying to have it inform my practice more, is how important the accumulation of merit is. That it is crucial, and that there are so many, just hundreds of opportunity every day if I can keep my mind in that and meet things with generating, a virtuous mind, and then accumulate merit and keep just connected to that. because there's so much merit that needs to be accumulated to progress. So those are the things that came to my mind.
Maybe I'll do mine, and then maybe folks can think about sharing. Okay, so this is what I wrote about. This has been an extremely very deep and profound teaching for me. And the reason was that it helped me to alleviate the pressure I put on myself to have to be somewhere in my practice by now. That it takes as long as it does is reaffirming to me that this path is hard work. So each day I keep my commitments. I try and confess and purify what I think is getting in the way of my bodhisattva aspiration. I listen to the teachings and think if they make sense or not, ask questions. I try to confront my self-centered thought and seeing it as the real thief and as the killer of my joy that it is. Helping others and be kind. I also try and remember to say to myself, showing up every day, doing my best is helping me create the causes and conditions to be a bodhisattva in the future. And letting go of how long it takes. I think of the years that I've been practicing, which aren't that many, I have always had a sense, a leaning towards discouragement when I think about these 3 countless great eons. And through the course of this past teaching, I have rarely thought about 3 countless great eons. I've kind of worked my way out of that and have a sense of relief. It's going to take that long. I'm accepting where I am, and I'm just happy to be creating the causes. Transforming my mind, cultivating my good qualities is never ending. But the other thing that was very important this time for me that kind of woke up in my mind is that all along the way, there is this very precise roadmap that lays out the purpose, the process, the obstacles, the speed, the scenery, the destination. Prior to this teaching, and I shared this morning in the motivation, is I thought the bodhisattvas came from some other planet. They don't come from this mishmash, this chaotic world of sentient beings. They come from Bodhisattva University out there far, far away. But they do arise from samsara. They were just like us. By thinking about what bodhisattvas practice, how determined and committed they are, and how joyful they are as they go along, reassures me that if I keep hearing, thinking, and meditating on the Dharma, and show up especially when my self-centered mind is saying, no way, that I will progress to one day, one life, to have spontaneous bodhicitta, beginning with deep conceptual understanding of emptiness, then a direct perception. My afflictions and ignorance will one day be eliminated along with all of their stains. So I think more than any other time in my practice, this teaching that Venerable has given has, and I'm saying this not from anywhere but a really, a place in my heart that really believes this. And so it has been quite a profound year for me to listen to the teachings.
It's going to be very simple, and I'm going to be honest. When I was listening to the teachings, for me, all the language was very difficult, and a part of me was saying, I can get it. But what I got out of that is that more I continue to practice, I'm hauled into that compassion that is behind all of that, all behind my wrong conception. So I remove all the difficult words and everything, and I say, keep doing what you're doing here, what you're being taught, and that's where you're going. Being able to feel all that compassion and being able to give it, which I hope that I will be able to really
open to that. So that's my little sense.
Thank you.
I think what stands out for me in hearing these teachings this year is to learn really what I'm taking refuge in. And before hearing these teachings, I thought I knew what I was taking refuge in. And I thought I knew about the qualities of the Buddha and the Dharma and the Sangha. And it was just very, very limited. And then as we heard about, especially how one progresses in the Mahayana path, just these amazing qualities that these bodhisattvas develop on each level, which go beyond what my imagination could possibly wrap my mind around, even just to imagine. And so, as Venerable Jigme mentioned, this importance on creating merit and also understanding emptiness and developing this vast wisdom which is going to get rid of all of the ignorance is really quite exciting. And then to also see these qualities that the Buddhas have, and it's so humbling. I mean, you know, as a sort of a silly example, when I first heard about someone being adopted, for example, I thought my parents were withholding a great secret from me. And I thought, well, I must be adopted, because I've just found out about what that means. But now, you know, every now and then someone will say, well, you know, maybe we're all tukos and we don't know it. Well, that's not the case. I mean, if we're on the path of accumulation, we know that we're on the path of accumulation. So I think once we're there, it will be so exciting. And so I know it's possible to drop back down from that point, but just to have those qualities even at that point would be just incredible. What else do I have? I think that's all.
Venerable Tarpa.
I'm a lot like Venerable Jigme in that I had a lot of trouble with the words, and mostly I learned a lot when I went back and studied stuff. And the first time even my notes aren't always so grand, because it all goes so fast. But then within, you know, being able to go back and look at things, I think the things that I take away from this, one are, it feels very sequential. And it feels like as we kind of progress through it, and when you think of kind of working your way back, it all makes sense to me in a way that seems more realistic than it ever did. It always seemed more kind of high in the sky and outlandish to me. And I think for some reason, I think the reason it seems different to me now is because I think it has to do with this distinction between what's happening with your realization of emptiness, that the object is the same, and this thing that the mind, the wisdom of the mind is deepening because your ignorance is kind of being washed away slowly, and it's the recognition that, I think because I had this view for the longest time before I had much teachings, that I thought enlightenment was like quick. You know, it was just boom, there you were. And that got corrected, but still there wasn't anything that kind of filled it out. And so when we started this, I was like, well, what are these zillions of afflictions that they're going to get rid of? And I thought they would just lay it out at each level. And in a way they didn't, and in a way they did. Because I realized when we went through the Bodhisattva Bhumis that the way they talk about what you're eliminating, although they don't get specific beyond the name, you know, we have the two types of obscurations, and then there's, you know, innate and acquired and innate and that, but then they go just big of the middle, little middle, all that stuff, and that doesn't really tell me like what's happening in my mind. And so that didn't get answered so directly, but it got answered in a way kind of indirectly by seeing what qualities we're developing. And so I thought that because this thing of the object is the object that you're seeing in meditative equipoise on emptiness directly doesn't so much change, but the mind that's realizing it is changing, and that makes a lot of sense to me. So that's one thing. And the other thing is this role of merit and really seeing just from my own experience how it makes a difference in my ability to learn. And I actually use that in my daily life, and it explains a few things. Like one time I was reading this biography of Daishin Rinpoche, and I was like kind of shocked. Like they took him out of retreat to build a monastery. And I was like, what's that about? Retreat is like number one priority. And I just never understood it. And then now when I look at this, I'm like, well, of course. Because, what good is your retreat going to be doing? I mean, his teacher took him out. If you don't have enough merit to make it useful. And that's very clear to me now that our mind needs a lot of cultivation. And so, this thing with merit is huge. And it makes more sense to me why people are spending their time the way they spend their time. And it basically helps me on the day level when I think about what I'm doing. And sometimes I might want to get frustrated because I hear about people this week who are spending 2 years studying Nagarjuna's text. And I'm like, I can tell you a lot about grease traps this week, but I can't tell you much about Nagarjuna's verse 24, chapter 8, and I can get kind of upset about this. And then I just balance my mind, and I realize in my own experience that in my day-to-day life here, I just say to myself, when I have the time to study, this stuff will go in. And it does. To the degree that I study, it feels like it's going in. And I have to make the effort still on my part. So actually, that's kind of how I take it into my day.
So the bodhicitta motivation when you're studying about grease traps is really a merit accumulating experience.
Yeah, it makes me actually, my motivations aren't so grand, but it helps me to clean them up a little.
Since you have to look at grease traps anyway, might as well make it a virtuous experience. Anybody else before we go on to the next question? Sure.
But I don't have much to add. I would say that basically what people have said is also my experience. The thing about getting real, not just real, like real in terms of you don't magically become a Buddha. And I don't think I had that idea really, but the step-by-step progression is so really clear. And so it also diminishes any kind of pride of either kind, of thinking that, I can do this, no big deal, or I'll never be able to do this. Either of those prides is just wiped out if you just look at it. And so I think I can relax with the whole thing. It's like whatever we're doing is of great value if our mind is in the right place, and so relax. A few countless great eons. As Bob Thurman says, what else you got to do? I mean, Venerable says the same thing. But for me also, in my refuge practice, the Sangha refuge has always been a little elusive for me. Not as filled out, not quite understanding what that's about. And this has completely transformed that. I've done the Refuge Nundro twice, and now I want to do it again because I feel like this piece is so much clearer, and the refuge is so much clearer, and why they're examples at whatever level they're at is so much clearer. So this thing about, they were just like me, and look at those minds now, and look at those different levels. And so this is something really very clear and specific to aspire to. And that's very cool. And the other thing that this has been useful for is it continues to illustrate the dangers of not developing bodhicitta. I think danger is the right word. Because as you look at all of the eliminating the afflictions and the mind states that are easy to get to, I can see how easy it would be if bodhicitta was not so strong to just zip off in that direction and say, bye, I'm out of here, guys, and leave everybody behind. So it's humbling in that way too, not to make any assumptions about the quality of my motivation right now and to really work on that.
Thank you, everybody. That was helpful to our folks. Yeah, very precious. I agree with the Sangha Jewel. Totally different relationship to the Sangha Jewel. Okay, so then we're on to the final quiz question, which was to compare the 5 paths of disciples and the 5 paths of bodhisattvas. Make a list of the characteristics of each of the paths in ways that they are similar and in ways that they are different. So this was a lot of fun, and it was really, there's a lot in there. So this is where I will need some support. And the way that I kind of thought about this, when I lined it out as a chart, I had the disciple, or the here solitary realizers on one side, I had the bodhisattvas on the other side, and in my chart I had all of the similarities in bold, and I had the differences in italics, and they're kind of, you know, paralleling pretty well until they get to the path of meditation, and then things just really, really change. So I'll start off with, I had some general characteristics that sort of encompass sort of the overview of the similarities and the differences, and then we can go into each of the paths. Well, I think probably the biggest motivation is for the disciple, the motivation is self-liberation, and for the bodhisattva is Buddhahood for the benefit of all beings. So I think that's probably, for me, the biggest difference. Similarities, the afflictive obscurations are removed. They both, as Venerable Tarpa said, the emptiness, they both directly perceive as the same. The arhat arhatship is achieved in 3 lifetimes. The here has 100 eons. I'm sorry, the solitary realizer has 100 eons, and the if you're a here, it's 3 lifetimes to become an arhat. However, if you're a bodhisattva, it's 3 countless great eons. So the time in which it takes to become a Buddha is compared to arhatship is very different. And when you get to the path of meditation, you can see why, and also the accumulation of merit makes a huge difference. Also, a difference is that the realizing emptiness, the disciple path, they use one form of reasoning, and on the bodhisattva, they use many forms of reasoning in deeper and deeper levels of that. The disciple sees the defects of cyclic existence in terms of their own liberation, and bodhisattvas see the defects of cyclic existence in terms of freeing all beings. And the disciple path has 5 paths and 8 grounds, and the bodhisattva has 5 paths and 10 grounds. Those were just the very general. As we get into the path, they get to be much more specific. That seemed to be sort of, for me, kind of the major general characteristics of the differences. Okay, and then also too, this is one that I wanted to have a little bit of help with. They eliminate, the difference is, let me check and see, that on the disciples' path they eliminate the ignorance that sees the self as self-sufficient, substantially existent, and the bodhisattva eliminates the ignorance that sees the self and phenomenon as empty of any inherent existence. What is the self? What is the self? Gating. Right. Right. But for a bodhisattva, to become a Buddha, you still are the same. Self-sufficient. That's what I'm saying, is the bodhisattva path. What is it that once they get past that? Okay. Right. Okay. Right, but what makes the difference that brings the bodhisattva farther along in the path to Buddhahood? Are they still working on seeing the emptiness of the self-sufficient, substantially existent self, or are they looking at something more subtler once they pass into the path of meditation and eliminate all the innate afflictions? Is there a different kind of self, which are the appearances? Okay, it's the obscurations. Right. The the latencies. Okay. Okay. So there is no difference on the object that they're, the ignorance. Okay. 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 Thank you. I still have a little bit. Yeah. That both the disciple path and the bodhisattva path, they're negating the same object, which is seeing the self as self-sufficient, substantially existent. Well, that's what that's okay. That's what I'm asking is, who's? Both. Okay. So where does the self-sufficient, substantially existent and the inherently existent self differ? Where are they eliminated? Where is that wrong conception eliminated?
Whenever they talk about force.
And subtle.
They're using SSSC.
Okay.
Whenever they talk about subtle, they're using inherent.
Okay.
The only translation specifically that I recall is when they were talking about
So I'm not sure, Kutch, I could actually repeat the answer to that question. I'm sorry to say. I don't have it clear in my mind right now. Okay, we'll move to the path of accumulation.
You can say that's a similarity.
Okay, all right.
Both engaged.
Inherently existence of this self and phenomena. Okay. 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 All right. It is. It is. Okay. So the path of accumulation. We've got some similarities and we have some differences. For the, do this quickly. For the disciple, generating the determination to be free unceasingly, day and night, is what brings them on to the path of accumulation. And the bodhisattva, although they have the same level of renunciation, it is the arisal of the spontaneous bodhicitta that brings them onto the path of accumulation, the bodhisattva path. So those are differences. Accumulating merit, both are accumulating merit on the path of accumulation. Refining and cultivating serenity by the power of their concentration to bring about physical and mental pliancy. And both attain an inferential understanding of emptiness in the path of accumulation. Difference, there was the small, middling, and great levels on the path of accumulation for a bodhisattva, with the analogy of the sick person, the earth, the gold, and the waxy moon. So it gets a little bit more specific on the different, and that's in regards to the bodhicitta. Okay, so those, did anybody find any other things that were similar or different when it came to the path of accumulation besides those three major things, the merit, the what brings them on, and the work on the physical mental pliancy?
Since we're discussing forest body consumption, the bodhisattva is meant to all beings, bodies, minds, beings, phenomena, and here in some of the lyrical talk, they just meditate on their own bodies.
So right from the start, the focus is different. Anybody else got something to add to the path of accumulation? Okay. Path of preparation. Both the disciple and the bodhisattva go through the 4 stages of heat, peak, forbearance, and supreme mundane dharma. It is the last path of being a non-Arya for both of them. They both have the union of serenity and insight which propels them onto the path of seeing. And during the path of preparation, they both have the conceptual understanding of emptiness. So they have that first, and then the union of serenity and insight propels them onto the path of seeing. So on that one, I didn't have any differences. If anybody found anything that were different characteristics for them. And once again, this is a real general one. I didn't get into a lot of the detail on this. Okay, path of seeing. They both become Aryas. They both have direct realizations of emptiness. The acquired afflictions are eliminated. They also, the 8 fortitudes and the 8 knowledges in respect to the 4 noble truths, realizations for them on that path. And then this is where terminology starts to change a little bit, is that for the disciple, the exalted wisdom of meditative equipoise, which is the actual antidote to the acquired afflictions, and this is where they have the approacher and the abider and one that is neither, so they enter into the stream enterer. So the approacher is considered to be the uninterrupted path, the abider the liberated, but it's termed differently for the disciple, or for the bodhisattva it's just simply listed as when they're abandoning the acquired afflictions, they're beginning to be abandoned on the uninterrupted path, and they go simultaneously right into the liberated path as they are eliminated. So the terminology is different, and so the disciple enters the stream enterer at that point. So that's a difference there in language more than experience. In subsequent attainment, the disciple is practicing the 10 paramitas. The paramitas, they are not far-reaching, and they're meditating on renunciation, the 3 higher trainings, seeing things like an illusion, which is during their method type, during their off-the-cushion time, method type of real, illusion-like, yes, illusion-like, like illusion. And then during the subsequent attainment, the wisdom type of realizer continues to deepen the meditation on emptiness. So the bodhisattva is somewhat similar in that they're also seeing things like an illusion during subsequent attainment. They're practicing the 10 far-reaching practices because of their motivation, the bodhicitta, and working on the emptiness, seeing the emptiness of the practices. Their bodhicitta is very much in their mind. Renunciation is in their mind during the method type of realizer when they're off the cushion meditating. And then the wisdom type of realizer as the disciple continues to deepen their meditation on emptiness. So that's what I had for slight differences on the paramitas, and that was pretty much, and then the bodhicitta for the bodhisattva, really keeping that in their mental continuum as much as possible. So here the disciple is the approacher and abider to stream enter, is what happens on this path for them, and for the bodhisattva they enter the first bodhisattva ground. They're both accumulating merit, although it seems that the bodhisattva is accumulating vast amounts of merit. They're both eliminating the 3 fetters, the view of the personal identity, the view of the unethical conduct as supreme, and deluded doubt, also similarity. Okay, so then when we get to the path of meditation, this is where things start to get interesting, and this is where I will need some support. I'm going to read what I have here because I went over this many, many times. So on the disciple path, the exalted wisdoms of meditative equipoise serve as the actual antidote to the innate grasping at true existence during the stage of approacher and abider to once returner. And they're called once returners because they're born in the desire realm one more time. So during this approacher and abider stage of non-returner, they begin to abandon and finally abandon the first 6 levels of innate afflictions of the desire realm. And they are also working on reducing their sensual desire and malice. On the bodhisattva's side, exalted wisdom meditative equipoise serves as the actual antidote to the innate grasping at true existence during the stage, the uninterrupted stage, right into the liberated path, having abandoned innate afflictions during each bodhisattva ground. So during the path of meditation, they've got the approacher and abider of once returner, the approacher and abider of non-returner, and the approacher of the arhat, where they're eliminating the innate afflictions. The bodhisattvas, and they do it differently than the bodhisattvas do. Then on the bodhisattvas, they do the eliminating of the innate afflictions ground by ground by ground. So we've got the 2nd to the lower 8th going on for the bodhisattva path, eliminating the same innate afflictions but doing them differently, in that the disciples do it sequentially. So they do, in the desire realm, they eliminate the big of the big, the medium the big, the small of the big of the medium of the medium. They do them sequentially, and they go from the desire realm to the formless realm, all the concentrations, the form realm and the formless realms. The bodhisattvas eliminate all the big of the bigs of all the 3 realms, and then all the medium of the bigs of all the 3 realms. So they do them sort of clumped together from coarse to subtler innate afflictions. whether there was no explanation on the difference or the time it takes, or I'm not sure. There was no explanation I could find in Jeffrey's book on what makes that different, but it was listed as being one of the primary differences. And then the disciples begin to eliminate the 5 fetters of sensual desire, attachment to rebirth in the form and formless realms, conceit of the eye, restlessness, and ignorance. And so what is probably the biggest difference here on the path of meditation is that the disciple work their way into eliminating all the 81 innate levels of innate afflictions till they become an approacher to arhatship, which is the uninterrupted path. The bodhisattva is not only eliminated all the 81 levels of innate afflictions, but they're starting to work on the cognitive obscurations during the path of meditation. So they've got a lot more work they're doing during the path of meditation than when what the disciples, the hearers and solitary realizers, are doing. So then you can start to understand why it only takes, the 3 lifetimes or 100 eons to get to arhatship, where for bodhisattvas it takes 3 countless eons, because these cognitive obscurations, subtler and subtler, evidently take a huge amount of time. The exalted wisdom of subsequent attainment of the disciple is the mind that abides, is the thought in the continuum which is intent on the bliss of the peace of oneself. So when the disciple is in the exalted wisdom of subsequent attainment, is really getting a sense, a taste of the mind that is going to become liberated. And it is just, they like almost can taste it at that point. And then the exalted wisdom of subsequent attainment of the bodhisattva, they're focusing on 3 states of during meditation of aspiration, dedication, and rejoicing. So they're building up that kind of thinking in their mental continuum. So they're rejoicing, they're aspiring for Buddhahood, they're thinking about others, they really keep rejoicing in what they're doing and where they are, and they're also practicing the 10 far-reaching practices and have those mental states going on as well. So they're doing that for the benefit of others, and they're also doing it within the sphere of emptiness and with the bodhicitta motivation. So this is where they're getting so close, and you can really see the separation of the motivation and why they're doing what they're doing and why they're going where they're going. And then the path of no more learning, and then also the bodhisattvas during the path of meditation are then cultivating all these qualities that we've been hearing about, this exponential increase of being able to emanate and being able to help sentient beings and being able to make offerings and being able to do all these trillions, limitless things by cultivating these huge amounts, vast amounts of merit. So that's going on in the path of meditation too. So then you can see why it takes those eons. And then lastly, at the path of no more learning, this is where the disciple becomes an arhat, the clear realizer, the mind that has exhaustively abandoned all the 81 innate afflictions. The arhat has a very subtle mental body